Before we dive into today's episode, just a quick word from the sponsor CWD Pond. Whether or not you're building your new koi pond or you're upgrading your existing setup, these guys have got you covered with sleeper pond kits, pond windows, pressure pipe and all the essentials you need to build a pond. And for Koi Perspective podcast listeners, you can enjoy 5% off using the discount code TKPP5. Check them out, all the links are down in the description below. Let's get into today's episode. Hi and welcome back to another episode of the Koi Perspective podcast. I bet you're thinking that Dave's like transformed into a lady here or something. He is. It's stuck in. Have Jasmin on. You've got a lot of experience around a lot of the societies. You've been involved in some judging stuff before as well, and then you've also worked in the trade and been a hobbyist for a long time. And another thing, you are a lady as well. One of the many few ladies out there that are involved in koi. So yeah, it's I've wanted to get you on for obviously speaking to you over the last week or so. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. As everyone's quite aware, I'm not as active in koi these days. I have other hobbies, other things going on. But I still wake up to my own koi every morning, so they're never quite far. But yeah, life's good. I have a horse now, taking it easy.
Yeah, horse, koi. Bit of a different hobby, that, isn't it? A different lifestyle, I suppose.
Oh, they're the exact same. They're both expensive.
How are you doing, Si? You all right?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Cheers, Joe. Not too bad at all.
We spent the weekend up at Chris Masters this weekend, didn't we?
That's a different experience. Yeah.
Yeah. You had the Chris Masters introduction. We were basically getting berated about having K1 in our biochambers and all that stuff. Yeah, it was a good weekend. So yeah, we've first and foremost a good place to start, Jazz, is like, how did you get into koi? What was the moment for you? Do you remember?
Yeah, koi was different when I got into koi. There was a much closer knit community, I suppose you could say, on Facebook. It started in forums and then gradually went to Facebook. It was quite active. You'd be talking every day with people. I first got a goldfish, I think, originally, and it didn't look quite happy. So I went and got it a friend and it still didn't look happy. And the friend I got it was a koi. So I started looking in how to help this sad-looking goldfish and its koi friend, and found it was almost £200 for someone to come and visit. And these are in the days where you couldn't just have scrapes sent anywhere. It wasn't quite as easy as that.
Yeah.
Most dealers couldn't even scrape back then. It was more specialised, and it was seen and spoken about as specialised. So it was quite expensive for a goldfish and maybe a 3-inch koi. So I decided to teach myself and learn, and it kind of snowballed from there.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I think it got a lot bigger than I ever expected.
Yeah, well, I don't think you go into it thinking, I don't know, you don't start with like a £20 coin and go, do you know what, I'm going to spend the next 10 years trying to raise this to like 70 cm and look after it. And I don't think you buy a koi thinking, do you know what, I'm going to learn how to own a microscope and do my mucus samples and have my test kit. Like, you buy a koi and right back at the very beginning, you just don't anticipate all of these things like that you have to learn. And for many people, they just want to get a koi and stick it in the pond, and it's not that simple, is it? Just in the same way, I bet it's not the same. You can't just go out and buy a horse.
Well, you can, but it's a bit more expensive. No, it was a lot different back then. I think koi were seen still as quite a throwaway animal. So people bought them and it was almost accepted that they maybe wouldn't survive, or it was always known that there was ways to keep them more healthy, but not many people were at that point willing to invest in microscopes. And they used to talk about microscopes to people and they'd look at you like you were nuts, because to them it was their garden pond, and now you're bringing microscopes into it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a hobby that one thing leads to another. So after I got the microscope, I went back very politely to the koi shop, or it's actually a pet shop, general pet shop, that I got the koi from. And I said, you have fish with costia? And they said, no, we've never lost fish. We can't. I was like, well, I've scraped them. And you do. And I remember the owner saying, no, we scrape our fish. It can't be possible. But if you want to come down and show us, then you're welcome to. So I went down and they set me up. This is how uncommon it was. They just wanted to see someone scrape a koi. Even as a major pet shop, they'd never witnessed it. So I went down and they'd set me up the cutest little corner in the shop, and I showed them how to scrape koi and showed them their costia problem. And to make me feel much better, they treated every tank in the shop there and then. And we became really good friends, got lifetime discount, and the feeling was great. And I, of course, didn't charge because it wasn't a business, or it's never been a business for me in that way. And from there, that kind of feeling of making a business. I was young. I was quite at the early days of my life. I wasn't on a major income of any type, and the feeling was quite satisfactory. So from there, I guess I became more and more active in the hobby. It slowly led to other koi keepers having issues, and I would travel all over the UK and fix ponds for people who probably couldn't afford it, and some people who could afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just one thing led to another. I ended up making really good friends in the industry. I got invited to some major events, meeting Waddy and some Japanese breeders at what was known as Koi Masterclass. A lady called Bernice, who nowadays I don't recall hearing her name much, but she was a major factor in koi health originally, along with Paula Reynolds. And I was quite blessed in the industry, but it was quite a small knit industry back then.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine a world where I don't get my information from online. I mean, we were talking about this on messages, and we were saying like we've both come into this at like completely different ends of the spectrum. Like for you, Si, if YouTube weren't a thing, if Facebook weren't a thing, can you imagine that koi hobby? Because we joined at similar times, didn't we? Really?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is a lot different now, isn't it? I mean, and I've mentioned it in past on one other podcast we did, that when I came into it, I suppose a similar way that Jasmin did, that my information mainly then was coming from forums, and because the transition hadn't quite gone over to Facebook, so I was looking on a lot of forums. I've said before in past I was doing a lot of research from people such as Sid Mitchell, Duncan Griffiths, via their websites, and then it's obviously spiraled into Facebook and YouTube, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to like say which is better. As you've seen both sides of the coin. There's bad advice online. I guess there was equally bad advice in person if you didn't speak to the right person at the time as well. Like speaking about like these major pet shops and things. Like some of the advice I got from some aquatic shops was probably less than adequate. Like, so I guess the internet can be good, in person can be good, but only in like the right capacity is what we're saying, I guess.
Yeah, I think Facebook kind of got out of control towards the end, or it kind of changed from what it was. There was a really strong community of really intelligent individuals that were all on the same page, and you wouldn't get away with saying the wrong thing on Facebook. At one point, you'd be literally set upon. You weren't able to go around just saying anything. I guess, Joe, you've probably had experience in this, where when you're new into a hobby or you're new into something, you gain your own opinions and ideas, and you're quite green in the industry. This is any hobby, any industry. And in time, the opinions you had in the first 2 years are probably quite different to the opinions you then have in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
It will change, it'll adapt, it'll grow as the more you see and understand the industry.
Yeah.
Days I was held to quite a high standard. And my opinions were more monitored, I guess. I was very careful about what I said. It's very hard to find written evidence of me saying things that were extremely incorrect, because back in the day you weren't able to get away with that.
Yeah. I mean, how many times do you go on Facebook now and like open it up and it's like somebody who's posted like a dead koi and it's like, can somebody tell me what the problem is with this fish? And like genuinely, I see that like maybe 6 days a week is, I can go through Facebook and scroll and see something.
To be fair though, Joe, I think that's kind of where most people's interest in koi starts, by killing fish, because then they want to start learning how to fix the problems that they're having. I know for me, I killed no end of fish. I'm not ashamed to admit it, because you start wondering then, well, why are these fish dying? And then that's when you start digging deeper into why you're having these problems.
Yeah, you get hooked on it, don't you?
Yeah.
But it's interesting because every time you'll go in the comments and it'll say the exact same things, like, what are your water parameters? Have you done a scrape? It's just, the community is pretty good out there, like in most koi groups. But I wonder if, when you go to buy if you go to Pets at Home and you've got like a fish tank or whatever, the people who work at like Pets at Home have to ask you like what filtration have you got on your tank, how many litres have you got, before you're allowed to like actually take something off the premises. But with koi, right at the very beginning, there's not quite that same. Maybe in the koi dealerships it's different, but in the garden centres is my point. It's like they sell sturgeon and all these kind of things, and I do wonder how many of them are actually going to suitable homes. And that's a complete, probably another podcast for another day, but there's not a lot of like advice right there at the very beginning or at the garden centres, at them type of places. And so I think, probably everybody does end up buying killing. But maybe if there was a little bit more support from the garden centre chains out there, then perhaps, because I know, for instance, like the cold water division at Pets at Home, like none of them use microscopes. I know that for like a fact. I've known people who've worked there before and then gone to work at koi dealerships and been blown away, like all these different things that you have to do to look after fish. So I've seen it firsthand. Jazz, I suppose from your point of view, when everything started moving online, was it because you've always been around the clubs and around the societies and that kind of stuff? In my mind, my club, my society is like online now because of what I'm doing and over the last few years. For you, do you still miss like the get together days in person?
Well, I actually didn't attend clubs, like meetings, generalized meetings. I don't drive. Where I live, the local club is kind of far away as such. To me, what my club was, it was much different. So naturally, I have a very large following on Facebook, and people would probably think it's random people, and some of them may be, but almost all of them I've had interactions with over the years. And I was kind of always the people's koi keeper, I guess. I started within forums and then Facebook. And my first kind of real interaction with clubs was when I went on to try to be a judge and join the main committee also for the BKKS. My only experience attending clubs is actually giving talks and such for the Essex Koi Show or judging shows. I guess I spent almost all evening, every evening, helping people. It was different back then. Lots of people did go to clubs still, of course, but the online community was kind of our club, I guess.
But you were on the committee of the BKKS. That's a big thing
Yes,
you
I
should
was.
say. Because the BKKS, for anyone that doesn't know, is like the central hub of all the major
So
BKKS clubs.
my time with the BKK originally, so I think I was just very well known in the industry already by then. I travelled up and down the UK, visiting ponds, teaching people, teaching dealers. I had a strong connection within Koi and Japan and internationally. I'd already been an honorary member of the Australian Koi Club and gave my comments on the introduction of KHV into Australian rivers. Quite a strong connection. I knew Sid Mitchell and I'd seen koi judges and I said, how does someone become a koi judge? And Sid said, well, I can put you in contact with them. And from there, I said, well, I'll give it a go. And there was always kind of like a misconception that, I don't know, you had to be something special to be like a coach. You had to have money or you had to be. It's the same ideologies that go around today, which, hand on heart, is nothing that I've ever experienced. But when I joined the BKKS and when I joined the main committee, I feel like a lot of people seen a change. I don't know if they seen it directly and at the time, but it was very obvious that we were all included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think when I joined, you were still doing your judging courses, and then pretty much, I think you obviously had left at the time because you were going into it professional. As from what my understanding, that was what you were going down to working koi.
Yes, so my time in the main committee was very different to the JSC. So the JSC, I was a trainee judge, amazing experience. The main committee, also an amazing experience. I was committee member, where I sat through AGMs and decisions and the rules. And I think my role, and at the time the chairman, Jacob, could probably confirm this, that I was very much someone who was never ever biased to anyone. I was on the committee to give a fair vote, to kind of stand up for the right choice. Not that anybody, any man, woman, or child has any intention not to, but I took the rules very seriously thanks to my time in the JSC and how they take their rules very seriously. And I believe that the core of the BKKS and what it's built around and the rules it's built on are correct and are very honourable.
Yeah, I think we've had disagreements over the years, and I think we've, one of the things, like, from me, I think one thing we do share is like a passion for the hobby. It's absolute. I think from
I
my
think what do you see the BKK as? What is it to you?
I honestly don't know, because to
Exactly,
me,
it's not a person. A lot of your opinions and your ideas, when you break them down, are not as factually based, because the BKKS is a society and years of hard work based on rules that it's not something that you want to go into with the idea that you want to find negatives it's an open society that should and did welcome anyone, and if at any point they don't, then that's something that needs to be raised in the correct manner. But it is at its heart not a person. So when you make opinions on the BKKS, I think it's very important to take a step back and remember that it is not a person.
yeah, and I don't want this to become like a slagging match about the BKKS, because I actually do
No.
think over the last few years we've seen like some good changes, and a big part of like the BKKS for me is the national koi show. Like, for me, that is the pinnacle of like the UK koi scene, and I actually think we've done a podcast with Matt Stevens, and I've been impressed with the work that he's done, and Paul Henderson before him as well. So like, it's definitely not aimed at anyone in particular. I think my other feeling is that there is an element of it that has been slightly superseded in terms of people moving online. So then what is the purpose of having the society there? And if it's not providing much for the day-to-day hobbyist in terms of what they're doing, other than the National Koi Show, which is a major event. And like I say, I'm very proud of it, as it has been in the last couple of years.
Have you ever attended a BKKS AGM?
No, but I guess why would I? That's the question.
Because you have questions that can be answered right there and then. That question right there and then can be answered. So to the average koi keeper, seems like, oh, what do they do? But I can tell you that I sat through hours of meetings while I was within the committee. There's a lot more to it. There's insurance to sort out. There's legislation around other aspects that I won't bring up now, but there is other aspects to the BKKS.
Yeah.
But I would encourage anyone with them sort of questions to attend the AGM, because it is an open discussion and you can question it. There are rules. And if at any point that you come to the conclusion that you and a group of others have better ideas, it is a society. If you want to run for, I'm not saying you do, but if any person wanted to run for any said position that then would enable them the power to cause change, that is something that's open to anybody. Anybody can do that.
It's like,
So I'd encourage you to go.
yeah, I understand. I think from obviously when I joined, I was part of the Yorkshire section of the BKKS, and in turn part of like the BKKS, because I'm in the Yorkshire bubble, so to speak, and so I could signify the value from the Yorkshire section, because I'd be going out to pond visits, we'd be going to visit dealers. I have the WhatsApp group, this wealth of knowledge of information, that kind of stuff. So from like that point of view, from the Yorkshire section, I can physically see like what the society is and how it affects my koi keeping and things like that. But other than that, I just don't know whether or not everything else has kind of moved online now. And from my point of view, like as a koi world in the UK, we need like a society, like an authorization that's kind of for the koi hobbyist as well, which is not quite, I don't think it is there. That's my feeling.
The foundation for it is, though. We all have different opinions of how things should or could be. But in reality, when you're within that situation, it's very hard to pull it all off all at once. I know people get frustrated with the answer of you need to turn up and you need to put your hand up and you need to vote and you need to put your money where your mouth is. But unfortunately, that is how it is.
The UK scene as a whole, there's not a lot going for it in terms of like like I say, the authorization type thing, or a major like nationwide club or society of people. There's no like central big news outlet for koi, other than like the publications that we all know in the industry. So I just kind of think I want there to be a UK scene. I want the UK scene to thrive. Over the last few years, I kind of feel like we've not particularly like moved forward as an industry. You know, we're seeing there's a lot of change at the minute. There's a lot of change, and I'm not quite sure like what the future is for the UK koi scene. I don't know how you two feel about it, but it just doesn't feel quite like together.
I respect your opinion, and I think it comes from a place of passion. I think we all want a thriving, fun hobby at all times. It is a seasonal hobby, and we're at the end of winter, so at the moment for everyone, it's going to feel like nothing happens. Whereas once we're in the midst of the show season, it feels different. Everyone's quite upbeat and enjoyable. I think it's a hard one. I think everyone has kind of a part they could play in that.
Mm-hmm.
I've always really enjoyed my hobby, and it's not been quite different to what it is today. I think it's a mindset as well. Like you can either focus on what you'd like to have and moan that you don't have it, or you can enjoy what you do have and work towards what you want. Like I could moan that I want a 150k horse trailer, but it's not going to get me one.
No, I know what you mean. From your point of view, Si, like what's in terms of the BKKS, do you feel like it adds much to your like day to day or year?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, just as a general hobbyist that's not really that involved with any committees, anything like that, from my perspective, I don't really get much benefit from it because I'm not involved in that side of things, if you see what I'm saying. So maybe there's a different view on to like the general hobbyist side and people what are sort of involved in shows, on committees and things like that. So I don't know, maybe there's different perspectives to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think when you're involved in it, you kind of have more of an understanding of what's going on. But I guess what I want is for a hobbyist that comes in, we started by speaking about the garden centres and things like that, like the people who start right at the very beginning. People just do go to Facebook or they do hop on YouTube or, maybe they'll join a koi club. But I think like the transition now is, I don't think people will, if they have an issue with the fish, I think it's so unlikely now that people type in like koi club. I just don't think that is going to be a thing now. Would you agree with that?
I understand where you're coming from. I think it will be. I think it's human nature to want to get together. To what level is hard to predict. I think I think it has a lot to do with mentality. To be fair, because I think if everyone who was at the koi show genuinely just made the conscious effort to enjoy it for what it is. I've always really enjoyed my time. Saying what does the BKKS give us? It's hard to summarize. For one, to a degree, thanks to them, I'm sat here. There's a lot of things beyond what you directly can name off that they have done and what that community is. I think it's quite a positive note, and I think I've it's hard for me to see your opinion as I don't hold a similar opinion. I do understand that things will quiet down but our community on Facebook used to be much stronger than what it is today, if I'm honest. From what I can see today, you might interact with each other, but you're not as closely connected. You're not as together, and there's a lot of negativity around as well nowadays. There was always some negativity, but it just seems a bit ramped up. I think it's fair to suggest that you don't actually have any issues with what you have as such now. There's aspects you want to add to it. And I think there's a lot of people that have worked a long time in what the BKKS is now, and they still enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think the aspects you've mentioned, I don't think there needs to be a removal of any, like, if that natural progression happens in time, so be it. It's hard to predict, but I think humans going to a koi show, as long as there's a koi show, will be a thing. How popular it'll be, I don't think that's down to too much of anyone's control. Koi is very new. It's only been in the UK for really one generation, reaching into two. So we've got a lot to learn and a long way to go. But I don't think anyone will inevitably not want to get together. If that makes sense.
No, I can understand that. I just think we're in an age now which is, there's a lot of people. I think I could probably say the three of us here are probably a lot younger than the average age of like a koi club. I don't think I'd be wrong in saying that. That like for us free to just rock up to a koi, people our age getting into the hobby, because I've said it before on a podcast. I think that like at the moment Japanese gardening is very trendy for young people. Koi is very trendy for young people, just Japanese things in general, anime, TV programs, whatever you want to. Anything Japanese at the moment is in trend. And so I think during lockdown, a lot of younger people got into it, myself included in that. And I do think that people our age, the idea of like going to a koi club, I did it. I went to the Yorkshire Koi Club. I was on the society for the Yorkshire Koi Club. I was, a member of the committee there. I was involved with the Great British Koi Show, and I did, a few years of helping there, and I was really proud of that. But I was by far like probably a 30, 40-year age gap between the next youngest people there. It's on average, and so like there's not a society for like the new koi hobbyists, and it is almost like a changing of the koi world, in my opinion. So like if I go onto the internet and I search, I've got an issue with my fish, why is it dying? My question is like, should there not be like a society? Should there not be like some webinars or something like that that's available to people on the internet for people to get? And I understand that like the BKKS already does a lot. They already do a lot. The National Koi Show, like I've said, is humongous, and all the other things that go on in the background, which I'm sure there is a lot. I'm not privy to all the information, and I haven't, like you said, Jazz, I haven't put the blood, sweat and tears in it to comment about that because I'm not privy to it. So I'm not trying to sit here and call out a bunch of volunteers. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to aim the conversation at is, has the BKKS or have koi clubs somewhat been superseded now? Because I do think all the younger people that are in the hobby, they probably attend the koi shows, but are they joining the clubs? Are they getting the information they need to get? Or are they going and watching Sai's YouTube, which...
Don't watch my YouTube.
It's a good example,
I know what you're saying, though, because we are in that digital age, aren't we?
Yeah.
It's a question I'd struggle to answer, to be fair. It's just a hard question to answer, I think. I think to a degree, yes, but it also depends on the individual.
I think we should put a poll out. Are you part of a koi club, yes or no? You can either leave a comment, or if you're on Spotify, I'll put a poll on Spotify so you can say yes or no. Because I'd be really interested to know like what the ratio is, yeses to nos. And I'm sure that I'll get a lot of people responding yes, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of people responding no. But if I were to guess at like the ratio, I'd say maybe like less than 5% people would be in a koi club. And it's sad, really, because I have, like I said, Jazz, you've been involved in it. I've been involved with it. And we had Paul McLennan on recently talking about without the people in the society helping put the koi shows on, I'm not sure they'll be able to do it. I'm not sure that people will be able to actually go to a koi show without the volunteers. I mean, Paul was pretty upfront, wasn't he, Si, when he said that?
Yeah.
Saying that it will die if there's no volunteers. So it's just, how do we, as this new generation of koi keepers, and I'm not trying to be self-righteous in saying that, how do we actually grow the hobby? Because otherwise, I do feel like we were in this, like, I don't know, middle ground.
I think I'm not sure about nowadays, but once upon a time you'd go to a koi show and you could walk around and say what brought you to a koi show, and there'd be a lot of people who said Jasmin on Facebook telling me to. You all play a part. Like, if you got out there as much as to say yes, get to a club, come see me, it's almost like you have to like be so passionate that you're like, yeah, come to the show, come hang out with us, come for a beer after, come for a curry. Like, that takes a lot as a person, but we all play a part, and not necessarily with you guys maybe, but I think even you, Joe, at some point I would have offered an olive branch of some kind. Like, we all play a part to keep people, even me sitting here today, like, we all play a part to make it inclusive and also to support each other. And I think it's credit that you have said that you support what you've said already today. And I think that's the mentality each person needs to be taking forward. You say, oh, how many people go to clubs? How many people do you tell to go to clubs? How many people do you tell to go to shows? How many people do you invite to come to the shows and go for a beer with you after? Like, it's all well and good going, oh yeah, come to the British Koi Keeper show, come to the Great British show, come to the All England show. But are you actually putting in the work to make that an enjoyable experience? Are you saying, hey, this is how it works, this is nice to meet you, thank you for coming, oh, it's great that you actually came, are you coming for a beer after, you come for a curry? Do you put in the effort?
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's many people out there currently putting in the effort. And that's where it's going wrong. Like, everyone talks about, I want a hobby like this, I want the hobby to be like that. Just do it.
I'd like to think that people would feel in some way, that people on like Sai is a really great example, and I'm sorry, Sai, I'm using you as an
Why do I keep going bought into
I
it?
know you're going to get all the slack, but you've been doing YouTube for what, like 3 years, something
Something
now,
like that,
so
yeah.
for 3 years, and like you put the content out there, and to me that stuff is brilliant for the hobby, and I do think it contributes somewhat. I'm not saying you specifically as some like god of koi now because you've done YouTube for 3 years, but what I'm saying is the YouTubers out there, and there's good and bad stuff. Don't get me wrong, but there is like a big online community now of koi keepers, and that is somewhat working against the clubs and working. Do you agree with that, Si?
I mean, I do think keepers that are on YouTube do actually play a part in bringing new keepers into the hobby. Personally, I do think that is a factor. I've met people before, not necessarily just me, but that have said to other people that, that share their experiences on YouTube, that said they encouraged them to build a pond or whatever and come into the hobby. So I do think that YouTube does now play a part. 'Cause like I say, we are in that age where, we're in a digital age. People watch a lot of YouTube and things like that. With the shows as well, I do think that people attending shows, I think that they could probably get into it as well, because obviously they come to shows, they see these beautiful, great big fish, and think I want one of them. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's two sides to it.
I definitely feel like the YouTube stuff has helped grow the hobby, but like I say, now it's almost like, at what point does the BKKS like move online? And I'm not trying to angle myself into that as the koi perspective. One of the main things I wanted to do as like the koi perspective is do stuff like this that I feel that can help. And I've done podcasts with Paul McLennan, and he put out a very vocal call to say, we need volunteers, else we won't be able to put it on, because the people that are doing it are too old now to do it physically.
I would sorry, Joe. I would personally like to see would be to see that the hobbyists that are in the industry that are well experienced and that have been in it for a long time, I would like to see them personally more active and offering the hand down to people that aren't as experienced,
Mm-hmm.
to help them grow in the hobby.
Yeah, because one of the first conversations that we had, Si, wasn't it? I think, and you changed my mind on it, is that I think they've really experienced really top level guys at koi shows and things like that. The people who keep the koi to the best are quite happy to almost like sit in the background.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to get them to come on here or be online and show people the right way. And like you're doing now, Jazz, like you've been around, in terms of the koi scene and helping people with koi ponds. And now you're here online doing it in a different platform that's not Facebook where you're usually found. So why not have more of this online, and do more stuff like that? And I guess then the question comes to, why does it have to be through myself and not through some form of like official society?
It's always kind of been that way. Online, it's a bit of a grey area because you'd ideally like to be making financial money and what have you from a business eventually. The BKKS can't be seen to be doing anything like that within the rules. They can't be associated with people who financially gain.
Do you still attend the shows, Jasmin?
As and when. It's quite different for me nowadays. Like as a trainee, I was going to almost when I was a trainee, again, this was not repeated very often. I was the only trainee often. There was also Anthony, but he was quite towards the end of his studies. So there was a lot of shows available for a trainee to be at. There always has to be a judge, and there's lots of judges, so judges might not get to judge many times a year. But as a trainee and no other trainees, then I had free reign. So I've attended, from my memory, I think every koi show in the UK at least once to judge it. Therefore, seen the fish up close. I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of koi. It would probably take the average koi keeper a good few years to catch up on the number of fish I've seen, just because I've been up and down the country for 10 years. If it's not traveling to hobbyist ponds, it's shows. And so I think at this point, I have no more questions. My hobby was always driven by I wanted to answer questions. I wanted to learn. I wanted everyone. There was a saying that you will never know everything in koi. It's a very well known saying. You'll never know everything in koi. And that saying annoyed me because why not? So I've always set out to answer every question I could ever think of. Like, what makes a koi have scales or not? what's the DNA genetic makeup that does that? It turns out it's SS and NN, like anything you could imagine. And towards the end of my time, I just didn't have any curious questions. I mean, there was a few, but the questions I was starting to have were a bit difficult to answer. So things like, it just became different, I think. I just didn't have passionate questions that was driving me to keep searching in the hobby, I think.
No, I was just going to ask you if you still kept tabs on what's happening over in Japan and what's going off in the UK koi.
So I'm very good friends with a number of breeders and people and businesses and hobbyists in Japan and all over the world, and I keep tabs on generally what they do, may it be family. We are friends. It's not necessarily an open thing. Equally, if I ever have any questions, I can ask and get an answer immediately. I think they're like friends to me, so I'm more driven to see that their daughters had a baby and married and these wonderful people that I've watched grow up and change for the last 10 years, and I really respect. Like, I know they breed good koi. I've known that for 10 years. I respect that. I like to see it, but these are my genuine friends now, so there's at no point do we not communicate, or we're not messaging each other monthly or anything necessarily, but we're continuously keeping an eye and supporting in the background, or saying well done, congratulations. If anyone ever rang me up with a favor, it would be no question at all, and I'd like to think it was likewise. So, but it's just a different experience for me now.
Can you give us a little bit of an insight as to like what you learned from like the JSC, like how you was taught, like what would that look like for some?
It's really hard to summarize. It really is. So factual information, they just give you tools, really. So it's very hard to summarize. But then there's also a lot of personality things they give you as well. I think when I joined the JSC, I conducted myself slightly differently. They do develop you as an individual, all round, as you are. How it was set up, there was a lot of pressure on me being the right individual. Any trainee, but also me, was turned out to a high standard, because you are representing and taking forward their life work as such. Like, of course, they have real careers and what have you, but their life work in the industry regarding the JSC, and it's a huge responsibility people need to take seriously.
Yeah. I think go on, sir.
No, I was just going to ask Jasmin, how long is that process of becoming a judge? Because obviously, I mean, we've heard it said in past from people such as Alan Tate that they need young blood coming into the JSC. So how long is that process of being a trainee to taking the exams to becoming a qualified judge?
It's by no means a short process. It's a good few years. I couldn't comment on the exact period because it changes from one person to another, the show availability and so forth, and how they combat that. As shows, once upon a time there was a lot more small shows across the UK, so therefore it was really easy for judges to rack up 30 shows a year. There was so many more things that it was easy. In my time there was far less. There was maybe like 8 shows you could maybe attend, and then there was always 2 or 3 that were held on the same date as another, which meant you couldn't attend both, so it was one or the other, which reduced the numbers more. So to get to the numbers of shows you've served at was difficult, and it takes a longer time. It's hard for me to say what it would be like now, because it's been a number of years since I was a trainee. They may have adjusted something to kind of combat that as more shows kind of decline. Even some of the shows that I've judged at as a trainee are no longer around now. So it would be hard. And it also depends on the individual. There's no, yes, you're in the JSC for sure. You could serve in the JSC for 5 years, and if you're really not picking it up, you can't beat a dead horse. Like, if you're not going to be a judge, they can't keep investing BKKS money into your travel and your training and so on and so forth if you're just not improving and if you're not the right individual. People think that's really unfair, but it would be a waste to the society. I know we need people, but we don't want to get into a situation where we're an NHS type care home and we just accept what we're given. The standards still need to maintain and stay high. I'm sure they're doing whatever they can to kind of face them issues. It would just be hard for me to comment on today. In my time, it took quite a long time, and they were already looking at ways to reduce that fairly. So they may have, I couldn't say.
Interesting. I think there's been quite a lot said about the JSC over the last couple of years, but I have nothing but respect for like the people. You don't gain anything out of it, do you? Like physically, other than
Oh
knowledge.
no, you
and
really don't. Like,
experience.
I think there's some major judges that are often spoken about regularly, but some of the other judges that aren't spoken about, we've got major doctors that are really clever people. One of the judges used to be Madonna's bodyguard. So like, if you could speak to these people and take 5 minutes to get to know them, you might actually really like them and find out what interesting individuals they are.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they have some wild stories, but it is hard because it is an isolating role. I think if you can attend, anybody out there can attend a JSC training seminar and therefore join the BKKS, because you have to be a BKKS member so that you could then sit them exams. Don't take it too serious, even if you don't want to be a judge. Just go and see what it's about. Make the most of the free biscuits, unless Bernie stopped doing that, but he probably still brings biscuits. And
What
just
biscuits are they?
learn some about them.
But no,
They're really good people.
I thought you were going to say they were really good biscuits.
They are also good biscuits. He likes to go to Japan and Holland a lot, so Bernie always packs the goods.
Yeah.
BKKS judge like Alan Tate. I know that my mentoring through Alan Tate for the years that I had it was amazing, is astounding, and there's so many people out there that deserve way more credit. I think they are out there. We just need to get a bit better at crediting people where they're due.
The one topic that we haven't covered that I said we wanted to cover was you're a female, a lady. I don't know, or lady, woman, whatever you prefer to pronoun. So, how do we get more ladies into the hobby? Hard question, I know. But how do
It's a difficult one.
you know what is it about the hobby that you enjoy the most? Because I suppose that's a good place to start.
For me, I love the challenge of the drive of finding the information and helping people and improving the hobby. It kind of just grew and grew. Females in the industry, how do we add? I think it's important to treat the females within the industry as you would anyone in
Yeah.
your work life. So everyone out there nowadays, we're not living in the 90s. Like, so to say, how do we welcome females? Well, firstly, it's a carp
Yeah.
related fish. There's always going to be more men that is into that thing, thanks to angling, which is koi is so new in the UK. It's like I said before, it's only really one generation creeping into two. It's not been around that long. That the majority of people who started it were people who knew what carp were, which were carp anglers. And there is many really good women in the industry. It's just maybe they're not as active anymore, or maybe they've kind of taken a step back. But I think I'd encourage everyone, like, we all have female bosses or sisters, moms, like, we all know how to treat females. We all know, like, if you treat your female manager at work bad, you'll get fired. Like, you know right from wrong. And I think in the koi industry, it's kind of important to kind of remind yourself that you're still in the real world. Some comments over the majority is fine. I've gone all over the country on my own to every koi show you can imagine, every situation, every event, and I have never at one point felt unsafe. Like, it's a very safe industry, but there is certain comments and behaviors that I know for a fact that individual isn't going to be acting that way outside of the industry just because it's a male orientated industry and there's not many females. It's still the real world. So
Yeah.
I could kind of say, how do we invite females in? How do we do this? Well, just act as you do in the rest
Do
of your
nothing.
life, because it's 2020. Yeah, do nothing. It's 2025.
Yeah.
You kind of have to accept that even a 5'6" girl can know a lot about fish.
Well, it's interesting because, like I said, my wife is she is more interested than she lets on. Like, to be honest, and she also understands certain things that now just from being around koi more, and she came to Japan with me and things like that. Like, she's been around it, but it's not like she'd go on social media and profess about it. And I don't know whether there's more ladies out there, and I'd like to hear more experiences and have some more people like yourself come on the podcast, because, to be honest, other than you, I'm not sure who the next lady would be that we have on the podcast, because there's just not many
There's
prominent figures. There are people out there. I just think perhaps there's more out there, but it's just perhaps feeling that they're maybe underrepresented is probably the better way of saying it, because there's just not many figures on the internet. And maybe it's about being comfortable or whatever to go on the internet, to be open. Whereas you're very open on the internet. Like, you spend a lot of time on Facebook, and we've spoken about that. But perhaps there's more out there as open about it, and it's how, like, can we encourage that more? Like I've said to you on this podcast, I'm not sure when the next one would be, just because there's not many represented in the industry, that can come on to the podcast. So
yeah, well,
open
I can give you a
invitation
long
for
enough
somebody.
list.
Yeah, there you go.
I can give you a long enough list. It depends. Internationally, there's quite a few. So obviously, the agent involved with selling the S Legend is a female. So there is major females in the industry, like very major, especially in the Asian side of the industry. And international judges, there's quite a few females. And also in the BKKS, there is some female.
I tell you where there is in the actual veterinary side of it. There's so many. I mean, we've spoken about Paula Reynolds. There's Fiona Vetar.
Fiona McDonald.
Yeah, there's so many, and again, it's just like, I think we need to have more on the podcast. So that's an open invitation, because I'm sure people are sick of watching three guys waffle on a podcast all the time with beards hiding multiple sins. So yeah.
Speak for yourself, Joe. Speak for yourself.
No, literally every guy that we've had on pretty much on this podcast since we started has had a beard. So yeah, so it's interesting. But no, I've really enjoyed that.
Well, you're koi keepers. No one ever said you're good at fashion.
Very true. But I've enjoyed that. And like I say, go and find Jasmin on Facebook and keep up to date, because I'm sure you might be back in the koi world in future. It's not forever that you've hung up your proverbial koi sock.
When I stepped back at it, when I posted about it, I did say I'd still be. It's just I'm not active to be at koi shows all the time. Like, I dedicated years. I've been to almost. I don't want to say it flippantly, but I believe it is almost every koi show in the country at least once. So it's not that I am not a koi keeper. I have a very lovely pond with some lovely fish, and I do continuously help people. There's a local club that I do talks for. I keep international relationships strong, and it's not that I'm not within the heart of deep down, but I just don't have the time to necessarily, at this point in my life, attend many shows as I did previously. But I still talk about koi almost definitely every week still. It's just sometimes in life there gets a point where you don't necessarily have the same amount of time. I'm always here for koi because I can't help myself. I absolutely hate watching misinformation, and I hate watching things go not as they should. And I suppose people might think, oh, Jazz is a bit of a Karen at times, and I am. But I was held to those standards. I seen the old school ways, and I like them. I don't think there's nothing wrong with them. So if I ever come across like a bit sharp, it's nothing that I haven't been put through myself. Like, I was corrected once. I was made to have these standards, and I'm product of my environment.
That's a great place to end, and I'm sure we'll perhaps have you on in future. It's not the last we've heard from Jazz, I'm sure. And to be honest, I'd be very shocked if we don't end up seeing each other at the National or the Great British this year. Very shocked if you don't make the big shows, but we'll see.
Yes.
Brilliant. Right, well, thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you, and thanks as always to Up North Koi Pond for joining me again. It's been a good one, and like I say, I don't want anyone to misconstrue anything that was said. It's all about just trying to promote the hobby in the best way that we all can. So yeah, we'll catch you.
It's been a pleasure, and I'm glad that I could add. I seen it. You're not the only one. You won't be the last person. I like to see someone come into the industry. I've seen people get a bit confused, a bit lost, and then they find their way and they settle, and they do and add great things to the industry like we all have, and hopefully it will continue. So I wish you all the best of luck, and try not to make anyone angry.
Called Jasmin on Facebook. Yeah, let's not try and have it out on Facebook again. We'll go 12 months this time without having an argument. We'll make it this time.
Yeah, I think you learned your lesson last time.
Brilliant. All right, guys, we'll catch you next week on the Koi Perspective podcast. Thanks again for tuning in.
Cheers.